You don't remember the first time you felt cold. You don't remember the first face that looked down at you, or what it felt like to hear a voice before you understood that voices meant anything. You don't remember the first time you were hungry and then fed, or the first time something made you laugh, or the moment you worked out that the hands waving in front of your face were yours. Those things happened, every single one of them. You were there. You were conscious, responding, feeling. A real person having real experiences in a world that was entirely new and entirely overwhelming. And then it vanished. Not gradually, not fuzzily, almost completely. Most people have nothing before age 3. A fragment here, a birthday candle, a specific smell, maybe something from age 4. But the first years of your life, the period of most explosive growth in learning your brain will ever undergo, are gone. Silent. Inaccessible. So where did they go? And more importantly, why? Because this isn't like forgetting a conversation. This is a systematic erasure of the first chapter of your existence. And the answer, when you actually trace it through, is one of the stranger things you'll learn about how you work. Before we get to why the memories disappeared, let's settle one thing first. You were actually experiencing something worth remembering. Infants are not passive receivers of input. Research is extremely clear on this. Newborns recognize their mother's voice within hours of birth. They heard it in the womb, and that auditory imprint is already encoded before they've seen daylight. Within days, they show preferences for faces they've seen before. They cry differently for hunger than for pain, differently for loneliness than for discomfort. The emotional range is present and functional almost from the start. There was someone home, a conscious, feeling, experiencing person was present in those early years. That person just couldn't hold on to anything. Here's the most important thing to understand about memory, and it's wildly counterintuitive. Memory is not a recording. When something happens to you, your brain doesn't press record and file away a video clip. What it actually does is far messier and far more interesting. Different aspects of an experience get processed in different places simultaneously. The emotional content goes one region, the sensory details go somewhere else. The narrative, the sequence of what happened and in what order, goes somewhere else again. For you to have a retrievable autobiographical memory, the "I was there and this happened to me" kind, all those scattered pieces need to be linked together into a stable, accessible package. That process requires a specific structure, the hippocampus. The hippocampus is the brain's indexer. It binds the scattered elements of an experience into something coherent and files it somewhere you can deliberately retrieve later. Without it, you might process an experience, you might be affected by it, but you won't have a conscious memory of it you can pull up years from now. In human infants, the hippocampus is dramatically underdeveloped, not slightly behind. The connections that allow efficient memory encoding and retrieval haven't formed yet. A baby experiencing something frightening, or beautiful, or joyful is like trying to record video on a camera with no memory card. The lens works, the processor runs, there's just nowhere for the footage to go. The memories don't form in the first place, not in the retrievable narrative sense, not the kind you can access 30 decades later. That's the first part of the answer, but it's not the complete one, because it still doesn't explain why memories from age 2 or 3, when the hippocampus is considerably more developed, are also mostly gone. This is where it gets stranger. Your brain grows new neurons throughout your life. For the most of the 20th century, scientists assumed this wasn't true, that you were born with all the neurons you'd ever have. That turned out to be wrong. New neurons are generated continuously, and the hippocampus is one of the primary sites where this happens. Here's the twist. In early childhood, the rate of this neurogenesis is extraordinarily high, far higher than at any later point in life. The infant brain is generating new hippocampal neurons at a rate adults never approach, and all of those new neurons need to be integrated into the existing network.
They need to find connections, wire themselves in, become part of the system. That integration process is disruptive. It destabilizes existing connections. It essentially rewires the filing system while you're trying to use it.
Imagine a library that's adding hundreds of new shelves every single day. Books can't be properly cataloged because the organizational system keeps changing. Old books don't stay where you put them because the shelves themselves keep moving. That's your hippocampus in the first years of life. The very thing that makes the infant brain extraordinary at learning, that explosive growth, that relentless generation of new neurons, is simultaneously what makes it nearly impossible to form stable long-term memories. The infant brain traded memory consolidation for learning capacity. You were absorbing information at a rate no adult ever could. The cost of that speed was that almost nothing survived long enough to be filed. There's a third factor, and this is the strangest one: language. Not just because babies don't have words to describe their experiences, the relationship runs deeper than that. Autobiographical memory, the "I remember when I was 5" kind, is structurally connected to language in ways that are difficult to fully separate. When you remember something, you're partly narrating it to yourself. You're constructing a sequence, a story, with yourself as the person moving through it. That narrative structure, that sense of a self that exists across time and can look back at its own history, emerges alongside language. Without it, there's no story. Without a story, there's no narrator. And without a narrator, there's no one to be the subject of the memory. You can't remember "I was there" if you don't yet have a stable, language-mediated concept of I. Studies support this across cultures and language types. Children who develop language later tend to have later onset of autobiographical memory. Bilingual children often have their clearest early memories in whichever language they were using at the time, even if they rarely use that language as adults. People who learned sign language as their first language show the same childhood amnesia patterns as those who learned spoken language, which suggests it isn't speech specifically, but language as a cognitive system that matters. The words aren't just how you express the memory, they're part of how the memory gets built. So those three things, hippocampal immaturity, explosive neurogenesis disrupting consolidation, and the absence of language as a narrative scaffolding, are all real, all simultaneous, and all working in the same direction. Together, they create a window of near-total amnesia that covers the most formative period of your existence. But here's what makes this genuinely unsettling. The experiences you can't remember still shaped you. Your first years are gone from your conscious, retrievable memory. They are absolutely not gone from you. Everything that happened in those years left traces, deep structural traces that influence who you are right now. The attachment patterns you formed with your caregivers in the first year of life are encoded not as memories, but as implicit expectations, ways of being, emotional reflexes that operate below conscious awareness. Whether you learned that the world was safe and responsive, or unpredictable and unreliable, those lessons aren't stored as stories. They're stored as settings, default calibrations about whether help arrives when you need it, whether people can be trusted, whether your distress will be met or ignored. You can't examine them directly. You can't retrieve the specific night you cried and no one came, or the specific morning you were held and felt completely safe. But those nights and mornings added up into something, a posture toward existence that you carry without knowing you're carrying it. Psychologists distinguish between explicit memory, the kind you can consciously access and describe, and implicit memory, the kind that lives in your body, your emotional reactions, your automatic assumptions about relationships and safety, and whether you are worth caring for. Infantile amnesia erases your explicit memories. It leaves your implicit memories completely intact.
You forgot the experiences. You kept what they built. And then there are the fake ones. Some of what you think you remember from early childhood probably isn't real, not distorted, not exaggerated, actually fabricated, constructed by your brain from photographs, repeated family stories, and the mental images you built while listening to those stories, then filed as if they were genuine experiential memories. This is extremely well documented and deeply uncomfortable once you really sit with it. Your family has a photo of you at your second birthday. You've seen it dozens of times. Adults told you the story of that day. Your brain eventually built a mental representation of the event, and at some point filed that representation alongside actual memories. Now it feels like a memory. It has the texture and quality of a memory. You'd describe it as one. But what you're actually accessing is a reconstruction built from external information, not a trace of the original experience. Think about the earliest memory you'd reach for right now. Where did it come from? Did you remember it unprompted, or did someone tell you about it first? Is there a photograph, a story that gets repeated at family gatherings? The honest answer for most people is that they can't be sure. Your memory of your own earliest life is at least partly a story other people told you about yourself that you eventually absorbed as your own. Here's what all of this means, taken together. The first years of your life were not wasted because you can't remember them. In many ways, they were the most consequential years of your existence, the period when the foundational architecture of who you are was being built at a level deeper than memory can reach. The way you attach to people, the way you respond to uncertainty, what calms you, what destabilizes you, the fears that seem to come from nowhere, and the intuitions you can't explain. All of that has roots in a period of your life that is completely invisible to your conscious mind. You were built from experiences you cannot access, and whether that's terrifying or liberating probably depends on how you hold it. On one side, you can't examine the foundations. The influences are real, they're shaping you constantly, and they're outside your conscious reach. On the other, the absence of explicit memory means the absence of a fixed narrative. The implicit patterns can be changed, not by remembering, because there's nothing to remember, but by new experiences that slowly update old calibrations. Consistent evidence that the world is different from what your earliest self concluded it was. The brain is plastic. The early patterns are influential, but they are not destiny. They're just the starting position. The first years of your life happened. They mattered more than almost anything that followed. You just weren't allowed to keep the receipts.